When the scent of fear is stronger than the scent of coffee, it's time to change your address. My name is Raiden, and I'm the kind of Omega who forgot how to bow. The coffee in my hand had cooled into a bitter puddle, the kind that leaves a metallic aftertaste where sleep should be. I sat on the warped windowsill of a cheap studio above a 24-hour laundromat, listening to pipes complain and neon hum at the glass like a drunk moth. In my other hand, a thumb-sized drive pressed a rectangle of heat into my palm, a spine of light in a city that preferred its bones hidden. I'd once called this city home. Packs here love to hide behind private members' clubs and polished glass businesses, they said, as if you could invoice loyalty or launder blood with an espresso machine. I'd been an investigator for the Northline pack, the good kind, meetings at dawn, files, neat enough to cut fruit on, a habit of telling the truth until it cut me back. Then I found the ledger and the photos and the warehouse list, and every rule about family became a lead weight tied to my ankles. The pipes rattled. Somewhere below, a dryer door slammed and someone swore. My stomach made a quiet promise to riot later. Fear moves differently when hounds are taught your name. It sits behind your ribs and drums softly, then faster, until even your coffee shakes. Okay, I told the drive, because fear makes you generous with conversation. One more day, and I'll deliver you to someone who won't put me in the ground next to you. Sleep had been an idea for the last 48 hours. My eyes felt sanded, my skull like an apartment with too many upstairs neighbors. I checked the window's reflection, my face blurred by neon dark stubble, a scab on my knuckle I couldn't remember earning. There was a smell threaded through the night, inching up from the alley, wet asphalt, fried oil, the bite of detergent. Beneath it, soap clean and precise. Alpha, not just any. Alpha, capital letter, and a whole biography packed into the temperature drop of the room. The city taught you to read scent the way other people read signs, a hint of resolve, old leather, a quiet discipline that never needed to raise its voice. Hunt without haste. I slid off the windowsill and tucked the drive into the stitched pocket I'd put inside my jacket for exactly this moment. The carpet snagged my sock. My breath snagged my throat. The helicopter arrived first, far off, a nervous insect in the cloud ceiling. Then the dogs, closer, then closer still, like a memory you'd tried to drown. Sirens bled through the block and bounced off fried chicken grease and spilled beer. Someone knocked at the door, knuckles careful. "City ventilation service," a voice said, cheerful as a forced smile. I looked at the door the way you look at a bomb you didn't order. Then I looked at the window. "Wrong floor," I called, and threw my coffee at the switch that killed the lamp. The room fell into neon and shadow. My body remembered the drills I'd done with the Academy pack before we disagreed about ethics, and I disagreed about staying alive. Backpack, already packed. Knife, legal enough if you didn't ask questions. Glass cutter, cheap, mean, my favorite. Second knock. "Sir, we have a report of..." I slashed the window latch, wrenched it up, and the city breathed in. Wet wind and alley steam, and the hum of 1,000 separate lives. The fire escape waited like a dare. "Fine," I whispered to fear. "We'll take the outside." The iron rungs were slick. My shoes found rust, then air, then the shake of metal under me. I swung out, pulled the window behind me, and climbed. Above, the roofline cut the sky into a blade. My lungs burned in that old friendly way. I glanced down in time to see the door splinter. Flashlights swept the dark like curious animals. I moved faster. At the final landing, the ladder jammed. A small, sharp laugh escaped me. Because when the universe writes your punchlines, you can at least deliver them well. I took 2 steps back on the shaking platform and jumped, caught the lip of the roof with fingers that remembered rock and river and a different kind of chase. Metal tore my palm. Blood stung the air. I rolled onto asphalt. Rooftops here were a patchwork. HVAC hulks, tar seams, broken bottle stars. Wind tore at my jacket. Rain stitched itself into my hair. The city's breath pressed into my ears until everything sounded underwater. Footsteps, soft and certain, arrived behind me. I didn't turn. I felt him in the way my body went still, the way a courtroom hushes when someone important stands. He didn't flood the air with dominance or temper. He didn't need to. His scent came clean and precise, like edges sharpened at dawn, rain, cedar, a thread of dark coffee that made my tongue ache for warmth. "You're 3 minutes late," I said, and faced him. Not the best for a legend. He was taller than I'd hoped, and quieter than I'd feared. Black jacket, close-cropped hair, a patience built into his shoulders. The city lit him in slices, neon blue along the jaw, red in the wet of his mouth, white in the eyes that never blinked the way people do when they lie. Knox. I'd read the file they pretended didn't exist. Licensed retrieval agent, independent enough to make Pax uncomfortable, known for never raising his voice and never missing. He considered me as if cataloging details he'd already known. My weight, shift, the cut on my palm, the borrowed backpack with a loose strap. When he stepped forward, the world stilled like a heart before it decides to keep going. "Give me 1 more second," he said, voice low and even, "and I'll catch you." "Romantic," I said. "Is this where you read me my options? Come quietly, come loudly, or don't come at all." His mouth almost smiled. "You forgot. Run." The rain chose then to become a curtain. Beyond him, I could make out the helicopter's searchlight dragging its square across neighboring roofs. Dogs barked 3 blocks over, a percussion line to our duet. "Tell me something," I said, buying seconds, checking distances. The gap to the next building, the angle of the maintenance shed, the fragile silver of gutter that would never hold a body but could break a fall. "Do they pay you by the hour or the bruise?" "By the result." His eyes moved to my hand. "You're bleeding. Occupational therapy." He took another step. The rain hissed between us like a warning translating itself into every language. I could smell him more clearly now. Discipline, gun oil, the faintest ghost of a sweeter note I couldn't place. It reached into a part of me I didn't let anyone pay rent in. "I'm not going back," I said. "And I'm not letting them bury what's on this drive." His gaze flicked to my jacket and back up. If he'd come only to bring me in, I'd already be on my face. That was the thing about professionals. You never see the moment they choose you. You only feel the air change. "You jump from rooftops," he said, "like you have wings." "Better," I said. "I have a grudge." I ran. The next roof sat a breath and a prayer away. My feet pounded, my knees changed their mind about pain, and I launched. Air cupped me in the city, opened its hand, and then I was landing too hard, rolling across gravel, heat racing up my spine. Something tore at my side. I laughed, because if I didn't, I'd listen for the thud behind me. No thud came. Knox didn't chase like a dog. He moved like weather, inevitable, patient, reading the landscape of my choices. I went left around the HVAC. He cut the diagonal. I kicked a loose cinder block. He stepped over the idea of it. My breaths got louder. His didn't. At the far edge, a maintenance bridge linked 2 roofs with the kind of optimism engineers save for brochures. I bolted onto it, the metal a drum under my shoes. Midway across, the bridge jittered, and a bolt leaped free like a throwing star. I cursed the city's budget with affection and sprinted the last yards, catching the opposite ledge as the bridge groaned its disapproval. Behind me, Knox didn't take the bridge. He took the gap, the simplest arithmetic of distance and muscle, and cleared it with a clean, cruel grace that made my mouth dry. He landed, absorbed the shock like the ground apologized, and looked at me as if to ask if I was done yet. I wasn't. I cut right, threw myself at a skylight, and let my body remember a thing it had done once when a suspect chose to become a ghost. The glass surrendered with a scream. The world flipped into noise and gravity and falling. I tucked, twisted, hit a stack of dusty canvas with enough force to knock the past out of it. A warehouse smell rose up. Old wood, old rope, the melancholy of retired machines. Somewhere, a radio whispered a pop song to a sleeping forklift. I rolled to my feet, pain writing notes on my ribs, and ran for the service door. Shoulders angled, breath set to a rhythm I could trick into cooperation. Behind me, a neat, efficient crack announced the skylight, accepting a second visitor. Footfalls, then silence. He was listening. The service door fought me. I shoved, it relented, and night kissed my face again. Alley, wet brick, a ladder that had given up earlier in the decade. I vaulted trash, skidded past a dumpster's perfume, and burst onto the street where neon letters stacked themselves into false promises. I didn't look back, but I felt him. Still with me, not too close, not too far. The distance of decision. Above, the helicopter's light found the roof I'd abandoned and blinked, confused, like an eye waking in the wrong dream. Sirens agreed with themselves. Dogs celebrated a mystery. At the next intersection, I cut left into the narrow alley that hairpinned behind a noodle shop. Steam swelled around me, warm and savory, and my stomach filed another complaint. My hand went to the drive like a reflex, and stayed there because I needed one true thing to hold. I reached the end of the alley and climbed the short fence, boots scraping. Chain link, dropped into a courtyard of sagging bikes and potted rosemary. The rain softened to a whisper. I looked up. Across the gap of concrete and shadow, on the roof I just fled, Knox stood at the edge. The city made a halo of him. He had a hand to his ear, the other at his side, steady. He looked down at me, as if I were the answer to a problem he'd been given years ago. His voice carried clean through the rain, low and unbothered. A radio line meant for people who thought they were in charge. "He's interesting," he said. A beat, like a footfall withheld. "I'm taking this one personal." The subway at 2 a.m. smelled like bleach pretending to be mercy. Fluorescent lights hummed over cracked tiles, and the digital departure board blinked its vague optimism. Next train, soon. I sank onto a bench where the plastic had learned too much about humanity and pressed my bleeding palm against a napkin stamped with a smiling dumpling. Metropolis smells like sweat, and cheap illusions. I had said that once to a rookie who thought the city could be learned like a map. He'd laughed. He'd also quit a month later. Good instincts. I needed new clothes, less blood, and a miracle that didn't come with a return policy. I settled for the first 2. A man slept on the opposite bench with the kind of practiced stillness that comes from working 3 jobs you don't have. His cart overflowed with layered sweaters, a pair of jeans missing an argument with scissors, and a jacket that might have been fashionable if washed in a trustworthy river. He roused when I approached, eyes sharp under the droop of exhaustion. "Hey," I said softly. "I need to buy some anonymity." He glanced at the napkin bandage. "Large or extra large?" "Large," I said. "And honest prices." He considered. "Honest is 5 for the jacket, 3 for the pants, 2 for the cap. Honest is too generous." I dug the cash I could spare from a pocket that had seen better decisions and handed over double. "I'll change behind the map. You get 2 minutes to judge my fashion choices." He grinned, a quick, unexpected flare of humanity in a station that kept its kindness in storage. 2 minutes is more than I usually get. I swapped out of my ruined clothes and into the layers of someone no one saw. Faded jeans, a scratched, black jacket that whispered of rain and cigarettes, a baseball cap that had forgotten any team. The clothes smelled like city and effort. I pulled my old shirt into the cart. "Sell that one for rags," I said. "It's had an exciting night." "Gonna tell me about it?" "I'd have to file the paperwork." I tipped the cap at him. "Stay safe." He nodded at my hand. "You too." By the time I hit the mezzanine, the napkin was a failed dam. I found a bathroom with a lock that threatened to unionize, washed the cut, wrapped it tight in tape scavenged from a maintenance kit, and stared into the mirror just long enough to recognize the stranger wearing my bones. Above ground, the night had grown more teeth. Below, it swallowed sound whole. Somewhere miles away, but maybe only blocks, sirens knit themselves into a net. I rode a mostly empty car 4 stops west, then doubled back on foot, through a maintenance corridor that smelled like inherited secrets. At the end of a chain-link hallway, a door without a handle had a lock with a sense of humor. I introduced it to a tension wrench, then a rake, then the idea of cooperation. It sighed and let me in. The old warehouse people imagine is big, theatrical, with dramatic beams and dust motes willing to audition for the spotlight. The old warehouse I knew under the city was a forgotten storage room of boxes the transit authority kept misplacing. Shelves leaned, Cartons marked with faded Sharpie slept under a film of time. My stash sat behind a crate of out-of-order signs, which felt poetic and a little on the nose. I knelt, got the duffel, burner phone, prepaid cards, a compact radio I'd modified until it belonged to no manufacturer. A tiny device that could spray static through a handful of frequencies like a cat throwing sand. Also, a Bluetooth mic the size of a coin, and a love note to my younger self, written in the ink of paranoia. I slapped the static sprayer into my pocket, clipped the mic under the collar of my new jacket, and exhaled. The room breathed back in the smell of stale cardboard and rust. Okay, I told the duffel. We both know this is a bad idea. That never stopped us. The plan, if that word could be used for a handful of instincts braided together, needed a vantage point. The subway had cameras that fed into a room 3 levels up where a bored contractor watched for liability and the occasional raccoon. I had the passcode because once, months ago, I'd bought a bored contractor a dinner he pretended to hate. I climbed. The staircase groaned like it wanted me to turn around. The control room greeted me with a wall of monitors stitched together into a living quilt of tunnels, platforms, stairwells, turnstiles, and one raccoon who looked personally offended by the existence of light. The chair spun when I pulled it, its seat shiny with long service. I dropped into it and found the camera labeled 12 billions, my platform. On screen, the bench where I'd changed clothes sat empty except for the memory of me. A couple argued with the quiet fury of people who still cared. A busker tuned a guitar that had seen wars. A man with a cart counted and discounted the evening. And then the air got thinner in a way monitors can't show but scent understands. He entered frame, like a hypothesis, arriving to prove itself. Black jacket, careful stride, eyes that drank information and made no mess. Knox moved like a machine designed by a romantic, all efficiency until something beautiful, and then a pause that said he'd noticed. He descended the stairs without rushing, and still everyone shifted. Around him, like water around a rock that doesn't ask permission. The camera wasn't going to tell me what I needed to know most. Scent doesn't pixelate. But I watched the tells. He scanned, noted, the slight flare of his nostrils when the breeze from the tracks turned toward him. Blood, coffee, and the thin, embarrassing thread of heat I'd left behind when adrenaline had argued with biology. He turned his head half a degree, toward where I'd been. If he closed his eyes, I thought, he could draw the path I'd taken from memory stitched into scent. He didn't close them. My chest tightened. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. Fear is an old roommate who eats your food and texts your mother. This was the thing after fear, when you realize the universe might be bigger than the room you've been hiding in. I hated that part of me that leaned toward the screen the way people lean toward precinct windows when the rain hits just right. I glanced at the bank of radios, at the microphone for the PA system, at the device in my pocket, whose only purpose was to make professionals swear. There was a beat here. I could take it. I tapped the static sprayer on low. No need to jam the whole police band, just enough to make the unforgiving frequencies between retrieval agents hiss like temperamental snakes. A soft storm of white noise spun out into the night. On the screen, Knox paused. He tilted his head, listening, then touched a finger to the earpiece tucked neat against his skin. Say again, his lips shaped. The reply didn't arrive right away. My static had teeth. I leaned toward the PA mic and didn't press it. There was a different channel I preferred, one I'd buried in the maintenance corridor last year, a tiny repeater that would pick up short-range whispers and slide them into the intercom speakers like rumors. I toggled the hidden switch under the console with a fingernail, felt it give, felt the thrill of a magic trick you perform for an audience of one. Your blood's in the system, I told myself, because talking to myself had gone well so far. Don't donate more. The monitor cut to the platform across the tracks. A woman in a bright yellow coat danced a small private dance to the busker's tune. A child clapped. The contractor's empty coffee cup watched from the console, judging my caffeine choices. Knox moved again, that unhurried, devastating glide that made the crowd unconsciously clear lanes. He stopped at the bench where the man with the cart had been. They spoke. The man shrugged, gestured at the map. Knox nodded, let his gaze wander toward the mezzanine stairwell then, toward the maintenance corridor that was supposed to be invisible. He smelled the blood I'd left washing down porcelain. He smelled the coffee I'd spilled when the napkin failed at being a dam. He smelled the thing inside me that was built for running, and the thing that, to my deep irritation, was learning how to turn back. I brought the mic close to my mouth. The city hummed. The static sprayer purred. Somewhere, the raccoon had committed another misdemeanor. You don't kill unless you're ordered to, do you? I whispered, and the maintenance speakers at 12 billions exhaled a breath of my voice disguised as building noise. On screen, he looked up, not toward any one speaker, but in the habit of men who learned early to locate the source of a problem. His mouth moved, a question to the air. He knew it was me. I knew he knew. Silence. Except for the train no one believed in. Then his reply. Not through the intercom, not loud at all. He'd found the right frequency to press his voice into my little trick and send it back. A coin returning along a string. Only, he said, and his tone made the word a razor wrapped in velvet. If the scent appeals to me, it shouldn't have hit where it hit. Words don't have scent, they have gravity. Mine shifted. The monitor flickered. The busker found a chorus. The raccoon probably applauded. I stared at Knox staring at nothing and everything, and reminded my lungs they had a job. Cute, I said into the mic. Too quiet for anyone but him and the hungry drywall. Try deodorant. It's interfering with your myth. A beat. His eyelids dropped half a degree, the only sign that sarcasm could still make landfall on whatever shore he kept to himself. The train arrived like a decision people made together. Doors slid open with a sigh that felt personal. Knox didn't board. He waited. So did I. 3 levels up, 1 lifetime exhausted. My hand wrapped around the drive like a talisman. The city breathed. The adrenaline took notes. And somewhere just beneath my skin, the hunt found a rhythm I couldn't help but match. The abandoned station had the kind of silence that knows your middle name. Emergency lights threw a permanent dusk across the platform. Red bars pulsing along the tiled walls. Red. Sheen across the rails. Red tremor in the air like a heartbeat that had decided to be a metronome. Dust hung where people used to be. Old ads peeled themselves into confessionals. Somewhere water dripped with the patience of a saint no one visited anymore. I moved along the edge of the platform with the grace of a rumor. The packet of powder in my palm felt indecent, a blend of inert minerals and a trace of omega pheromone I'd harvested from shirts I didn't want to think about. The city chemist who'd owed me a favor had called it scent glitter. I'd called it a crime waiting for a witness. Okay, I told the platform. Because who else was I going to tell? Let's make bad decisions look like choreography. I slit the foil with a thumbnail and, walking into the shallow breath of the station's air, shook the powder out in a lazy arc over the lip of the opposite platform, along the ladder down to the tracks, and especially around the maintenance door I'd propped ajar with a screwdriver and hope. The stuff didn't smell like much to me. Faint spice, clean sweat, a ghost of heat, but to an alpha trained to read scent like scripture, it would be a story with footnotes. Footsteps above, far away, too measured to be anything but him. The sound moved like confidence. I tucked the empty packet into my pocket and stepped into the shadow of a column. The red light put a blush on concrete. The rails below hummed with absence. Every hair on my arms took attendance. I didn't have to wait long. He arrived without flourish. 1 second, empty space, and the station's old lungs. The next, Knox at the head of the stair, black jacket catching a slice of light that turned him briefly into a silhouette from a cautionary film. He paused as if greeting the room. Then he descended, each footfall finding the step as if it had sent an invitation. The scent hit him 3 treads from the bottom. I saw it, not a flinch, not even a change in stride, just the smallest shift in his breath, the way a hunter adjusts to wind. His gaze skimmed the platform, slid across the maintenance door, narrowed. A fraction at the shimmer in the air where my scent glitter had settled. Overdid it on the cologne, he said, voice low enough to belong to the station. Trying a new brand, I said from the column's other side. Oh, the bad idea. He didn't pivot toward my voice. He let it hang between us like a question we both already knew the answer to. He walked past the ladder. He walked past the door. He walked toward me. I stepped out because hiding had started to feel like borrowing, and I was tired of paying interest. We faced each other across 3 yards of red light and a history neither of us had agreed to. Close up, he was more human than the file suggested. Wider mouth, a small scar at the brow that softened nothing, eyes the color of decisions you can't take back. The air around him tasted like rain and restraint. You came alone, I said. Your team late again? Sometimes teams get in the way of results. And sometimes results get in the way of sleep. You look like you haven't met Sleep's family. I met them, I said. They asked for ID. His gaze flicked to the line of powder glimmering by the door. He breathed in, out, patient, and the corner of his mouth did the almost smile I was beginning to suspect was his version of reckless. You laid a scent trap, he said mildly. Either you're trying to lure me somewhere, or you wanted me distracted enough to make a different mistake. Why limit myself? I shifted my weight, let him see it. The knife's handle pressed a small truth against my palm. I can multitask. He took a step closer, and the red light wrapped us both, like a warning pretending to be a blessing. I could smell him clearly now. Cedar, clean cotton, a note of coffee that didn't apologize. Beneath it, something quiet and stubbornly gentle that I didn't have a category for. You could have run farther, he said. You could have called for backup. Silence. Then, you left blood in a bathroom. You smelled that? The tiles did. A beat. And the coffee. That one was deliberate, I said. Leave them a path, and they stop inventing new ones. Which am I? He asked. Them? You're the part of them that can do math, I said, and moved. The powder I'd thrown was more than perfume. It made traction into a suggestion. I slid right across it like an argument, planted on dry tile, and went for his blind side. He wasn't there. He flowed. That same ruthless economy, that same apology-resistant grace. He let me come, let the distance close until the blade's flat kissed his throat. Not a cut, a promise. Heat bottlenecked in my chest. My arm trembled the smallest amount, hormones and honesty elbowing each other for room. Up close, I could see where his pulse lived under skin, steady as a metronome, unbothered by the edge of metal and the dumb adrenaline of men playing serious games. Don't, he said softly. Then don't make me, I said, and discovered my voice had found a lower register reserved for courthouse hallways and bedside prayers. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't shift his weight. He looked at me with an attention that made the room smaller without making it cruel. You won't, he said. I pressed just enough to insist on reality. You don't know that. I know you didn't cut the officer outside your building when you could have, he said. I know you left the door splintered and no one dead. I know you brought a knife to tilt the field, not to salt it. And I know, I said, because apparently we were trading inventories of conscience. Now, that if you wanted me on the floor, we wouldn't be talking. Something like approval flashed in his eyes, not for me, but for the fact that the truth had finally joined our conversation. Raiden, he said, tasting my name like he was checking its weight. You're not going back. No. And you won't give me the drive. Also, no. He nodded once. Not agreement, just comprehension. Then he moved. The hand that had been a suggestion became a lesson. He slid along my forearm, found the nerves under my wrist with a pressure that was both polite and absolute, and my fingers opened because fingers are cowards when spoken to correctly. The knife clanged onto the platform, sudden and embarrassed. He spun me with the same economy he gave to everything, and my shoulders met tile. He didn't slam. He placed. His forearm came across my collarbones, not crushing, just there, a line of heat keeping me honest. His knee pinned my thigh with enough precision to make a point. The knife lay at my boot, useless and opinionated. His breath brushed my ear when he leaned close, red light turning us into a photograph from someone else's life. Don't pretend to be a predator, I said, and didn't recognize my own voice for its calm. You're just an instrument. The laugh that found his throat was small and disbelieving, like he discovered a piano in a closet. He bent that last fraction until his mouth hovered near the cartilage of my ear, until the scent of him rearranged my thoughts with unasked-for tenderness. An instrument, he whispered, velvet on steel. That caught you. Time narrowed to the place my body met the wall and the place where his voice threaded under my skin. It wasn't romance. It wasn't mercy. It was the clarity of a blade held up to light against a field of noise. We looked at each other, close enough to see the veins in his eyes, the old fracture at my nose, the question neither of us had jurisdiction to ask. For a moment, bare and reckless, the roles in the room went strange. The hunter looked caught. The prey measured the line of escape and chose not to take it. Everything tilted. Then he stepped back. The pressure lifted. Cold air claimed my chest, where his forearm had been. He reached down, nudged the knife toward me with his toe, like giving a dog its bone, and straightened. "Run," he said. Not quite gentle, not quite cruel. "If you think you can." I stayed against the wall a beat longer than pride allows, cataloging the places my body hummed and the places it argued. The knife winked up at me and tried to pretend this had been its idea all along. "You're enjoying this," I said, pushing off the tile. "Do you charge extra?" "By the result," he said, and the red light put a halo on a man who didn't believe in them. He turned his head, as if listening to a station that had decided to speak again. Somewhere above, the world remembered sirens. "You let me go," I said. "I adjusted a variable," he said. "There's a difference." I slid the knife back into its sheath, the motion as steady as my pulse wasn't. "Why?" His eyes took me in, not clinically, not hungrily, precisely. "Because the people you stole from don't want justice," he said. "They want quiet. And you?" "I want the truth to do its job," he said. "And I want to see what you do when no one's telling you who to be." Words deserted me just long enough to notice the exact angle of his mouth when he didn't smile. "Try to keep up," I said, which was bravado dressed as gratitude. He stepped aside like a door deciding to be a window. I moved past him, every nerve convinced this was a trap, every sense offended that it wasn't. The maintenance door waited, my glitter-sharp trail sparkling uselessly. I paused, half-turned. "If you catch me again," I said, because apparently I'd developed a death wish with a sense of timing, "what then?" He looked at me the way men look at maps they intend to redraw. "Then," he said, voice low enough to belong to me for a second, "we stop pretending we're the only two variables." I didn't have a good answer to that, so I took the bad option. I left. The maintenance corridor swallowed me with the efficiency of things designed for disappearance. Behind me, the station exhaled. Above, somewhere, a city decided nothing had happened. I ran, not because he told me to, but because for the first time since it started, the hunt felt like something I might choose. Rain makes this city honest. It peels the neon off the glass and lets you smell what everything is made of: wet brick, hot wire, old bread, the stubborn ghost of gasoline. By the time I reached the attic, the kind of space landlords call charming and paramedics call a hazard, I was drenched enough to be on speaking terms with my bones. The ceiling sloped like it regretted a decision it made in the 70s. A single dormer window looked out over a serrated skyline and a billboard that insisted no one was lonely with the right credit card. I peeled off my jacket and set the drive on the milk crate I called a table. The roof creaked when the storm rolled its shoulder. The room smelled like dust and forgotten cedar. I breathed it in and felt something in me finally sit down. "You left him a choice," I told the water crawling down the window. "So now, you have to live with yours." The power in the building had ideas about retirement, but my gear didn't care. I opened the battered laptop, coaxed it to life, and slid the tiny radio interface into a USB port that had forgotten its boundaries. Code filled the screen like rain fills gutters, streams and eddies, the occasional leaf of punctuation getting stuck at the wrong turn. On the corner of the desk, a cheap earpiece blinked its comfortingly blue lie. The Northline pack had taught me more about networks than anyone intended. When you're the investigator they call for the hard cases, You learn to trace not just money and bodies, but habits. People have fingerprints in the way they send messages, spacing, rhythm, favorite mistakes. Packs do, too. The Northline systems had a habit of thinking they were smarter than everyone. That makes you sloppy. A hiss slid through the band. I tuned and retuned, nudging the dial with the kind of patience you pretend to cultivate for meditation apps. Static broke open to reveal a signal weaving through a narrow gap like a thief with a map. Encrypted, not by the book. And there, under the math, like the aftertaste at the end of a drink you didn't order, his signature. Kai, I said aloud, and the attic accepted the name like it accepted dust. You're still breathing. We'd been partners once, in the way packs define partnership. You cover my back, and I pretend your knife is for vegetables. He'd been the kind of alpha who never raised his voice because silence did his bidding. Good at reading rooms, better at reading people, best at pretending reading wasn't the same as owning. Together, we closed cases others called poisonous. Together, we stepped into rooms where the air had lumps in it. Together, until the ledger, the flashback arrives like lightning, so bright it makes the present a shadow. We were in a storage unit the size of a lie. The air had been warehouse cold, the light, the color of old teeth. I remember the weight of the binder in my hands. A catalog of wrong, invoices and photos and names arranged into a calculus of pain. Omegas tagged, tested, transported. Not for trafficking in the way the news liked to scold itself for, but for entertainment that watched itself in the mirror. Underground rings where scent was a weapon and bodies were arenas. Bets laid with the confidence of gods. Medical notes crisp with contempt. Handwritten comments from men who thought the law wrote itself in their handwriting. Close it, Kai had said, voice flat enough to be a floor. It's bigger than us. Everything is bigger than us, I'd said. That's not an argument. His eyes had been the kind that never blinked on camera. You're not hearing me. I'm hearing the part where we're cops, I'd said, and I'm smelling something dead. The next morning, the unit was clean. Our reports were gone. My access changed itself into stone, and our commander, who was supposed to be the adult you call when the house is on fire, looked at me like I'd spilled coffee on his deck. You're making enemies, Raiden, he said. We can't protect you from yourself. Then protect them from me, I'd said, and felt the temperature of the room drop the smallest, most lethal degree. The day after, I was a problem. The day after that, I was a traitor. Kai said the words like he was submitting a requisition. He deleted the files like he was taking out the recycling. He didn't raise his voice. He raised the ground under my feet and let me learn to fly or break. Attic, let the thunder have the last word. I blinked back into the present with a headache that remembered too much. On the screen, the encrypted message finished its loop. I caught it by the leg and shook. It bit down, of course it did. But every message wants to be read. That's how they're born. It wasn't a manifesto. It was a logistics update, the kind you send when you think the floor is listening but not paying. Attention. Assets relocated. Schedules adjusted. A note about surveillance on the anomaly. There were coordinates. There was a timestamp that pretended to be wrong. There was a line about a retrieval contractor who had exceeded assignment parameters. Knox. I looked at the ceiling until my neck made a complaint. He's in your game now, I said to the plywood. Congratulations. You just gave him a reason. The earpiece inched into my field of vision. I put it on, not because I wanted company, but because sometimes silence is an accomplice to the worst parts of my brain. The band crackled. A voice I didn't know, polished, bored, said a thing about clearing sectors. Another voice, irritable, hungry, growled something about visibility. Then something clearer, sharper, clean as a scalpel. Hunter 1, update. I knew they meant Knox. Hunters get numbers when bureaucracy finds them too pretty for names. A second of static. Then him, the tone that never had to raise itself, no contact, negative location capture. Continuing sweep. He sounded like a report. He sounded like a man who decided to be a tool because tools don't get blamed. He sounded like a human being who had once been something else, and had the good manners to bury it in professional sentences. Amendment, the controller said. Paper shuffled in a way that made me want to light offices on fire. Directive update, terminate, if secure retrieval is not viable. My body translated the sentence into cold. On the other end, a pause. The small kind that makes everyone on the frequency look at their watch. Then, the softest exhale, the kind you can only hear if you've been listening to someone long enough to know how they hold their breath. Copy, Knox said. Neutral. Obedient. False. I didn't realize I'd made a fist until the earpiece popped with the friction of my jaw. Across the attic, the dormer window recorded the rain with the patience of a file clerk. I pictured his phone in his hand, the message lighting his face the way lightning lit wet streets. I pictured him looking down, some muscle in his jaw rehearsing the speech he would not give to the men who thought they owned him. Don't, I thought at him, which is a useless prayer and a necessary one. The coordinates in Kai's message mapped to a block of the old quarter where buildings pressed into each other like weary barflies. We'd used a stash there once, before ethics started moonlighting as an enemy. It was the kind of bolt hole that thought it was clever for remembering it was ordinary, behind a locksmith shop, up a flight of inconsequential stairs, under a roof that leaked only when it missed someone. I packed fast, threw a hood over my head, and let the storm make a choice about me. The street below yawned, spat up a taxi, swallowed a curse. I took the fire escape and jogged through the rain, its needles writing little notes all over my skin. The city smelled like it wanted to be forgiven. I didn't have the jurisdiction. The locksmith's was dark when I got there, the kind of closed that wasn't temporary. A for lease sign leaned against the inside of the glass, and thought it was a mirror. I went around back, where the alley kept its secrets under a tarp and a bicycle grave. The second-floor stairs were slick as a lie. I climbed anyway. The door to the stash room still had the scratch marks I'd made with a paperclip when the old lock had tried to explain itself. Inside, dust greeted me like a polite, unfriendly neighbor. The room was small enough to make your thoughts take turns. 2 crates, a desk, a chair that groaned in a language I didn't speak, and the kind of window that remembered when air had more lead in it. And the scent, new, familiar, impossible to miss, rain, cedar, the discipline of a life lived in straight lines. Threaded through it, something like dark coffee and the idea of rest. Knox had been here minutes ago, or he had been here often enough to make the room forget how to be itself. I didn't reach for the knife. I reached for the truth and found, as usual, that it didn't mind being late. You could stand to knock, I said. He emerged from the deeper corner of shadow with the courtesy of fog. The red from the exit sign down the hall painted his cheekbone like a wound. He wore the same jacket, the same quiet, and a new tension at the mouth that hadn't been there on the platform. Would you have opened? He asked. I would have considered it, I said. I'm in a generous mood. Is that what we're calling it? He scanned the room, taking inventory. I watched his eyes hit the familiar, the crate with the false bottom, the desk drawer with the stripped screw, the tiny camera we'd installed behind the curtain rod back when we thought we were clever. He caught that last one, of course he did. His glance landed on the rod and slid away with deliberate disinterest. You're expecting someone, he said. I'm expecting everyone, I said. But yes. You pulled a message, he said. Not a question. Your bosses are poets, I said. They write very moving grocery lists. His hand moved in his pocket. Phone, I assumed, or a habit. For a second, the smallest, most telling second, his jaw tightened around the idea of an order. Then the muscle released itself, as if discipline had rolled its shoulders. They changed my directive, he said, flat. If retrieval isn't viable. I heard it in the frequency still tucked in my ear, in the rain pressing the window, in the part of me that knows the exact weight of betrayal because I carry it in my left side. He looked at me, as if deciding whether to tell the truth was more dangerous than telling a lie. I don't plan to comply. You'll lose your license, I said, because sometimes we say practical things to hide the beating heart tapping Morse code behind them. I've lost more important things, he said. Quiet, not for sympathy. For the record. We stood there for a long breath while the storm filed paperwork. Outside, a siren rehearsed a solo. Inside, Dust remembered other boots. Northline, he said finally. And the name landmined the room. Why did they pick you as the traitor? Because I made it easy, I said, and let the memory lay the cards. Because I found something I was supposed to lose. Because I didn't understand that loyalty is a brand name and truth is a generic. What did you find? They sell us, I said. Not the way civilians think. Rings, fights, testing. You can spin it any way you like, but when you watch the footage, the scent is the same. Fear and disinfectant. His eyelids lowered, not in judgment, but the way a man braces against a photograph. And your partner filed the report, I said, then filed me. Kai. The name brought the temperature down. Knox didn't move, but everything around him did. The room rearranged itself into a smaller version of itself. If rage has a scent, his didn't let it out. It stayed under the coffee and cedar, contained. Learned. He's in the system, I said. I caught his hand on an update. He's watching. He knows you're off script. Good, Knox said, and for the first time since we met, his voice had an edge I recognized from my own. Then he'll stop underestimating the problem. Which problem am I asked, because humor is a ladder out of holes I don't have shovels for. The one that doesn't die, he said, and the one that makes other people decide whether they're alive. The window's old glass became a mirror for a moment, and it showed me a man I almost recognized, thinner, sharper, more tired than anyone should be at 29, and newly stupidly stubborn about refusing to break. The room smelled like rain trying to be absolution. I rubbed the blood-raw line at my palm, and it tutted at me like an ant. Don't get noble, I said to him. People who get noble around me end up with interesting scars. I have some, he said. They're not interesting. I almost smiled. You got an order to kill me, and came to talk. You left me a frequency, he said, and a choice. I'm returning the favor. We moved through the details then. The timetable and Kai's message, the camera grid I knew from, a life that used to fit me, the way the controllers rotate patrol patterns when they're bored. Our words braided into something that smelled like trust from a distance. Up close, it smelled like two men refusing to be what paperwork said. Back entrance, I said, pointing. Camera on the landing died in June. I never told anyone to fix it. Front camera's still live, he said, nodding toward the curtain rod. And so is the one you didn't notice. My head snapped. He gestured up to the corner near the ceiling, where a lens no bigger than a fingernail sat smug against shadow. Kai, I said. It wasn't a question. The air shifted. I didn't hear the camera move, but I smelled it. Faint metal, colder than the room, a clinical chill like a lab you're only alive in because the paperwork hasn't caught up. If scent can be a temperature, this was below freezing. No sweetness, no heat, no memory of rooms with laughter in them. I walked toward the lens as if toward a dog I used to trust. Enjoying the show? I asked the corner. You could have sent flowers. Knox was at my shoulder before the last word caught itself. He reached up, pinched the tiny wire like he was removing a splinter from a sleeping child, and the feed went blind. For a heartbeat, we stood too close in a room too small, while the storm held its breath. He's not going to stop, I said. He doesn't get tired. He delegates that. So do I, Knox said. I give my fatigue to the morning. It should have been funny. It ended up being a vow. What's your plan? I asked. Find him, he said. Find the people behind him. Make the ground bad for them. Remove your name from their lists. And if your license goes with it. He looked at me like the stupidest thing I'd said tonight was the one most people would call reasonable. Licenses are for the parts of our lives we can afford to lose. The rain made a new choice and came harder. Somewhere in the alley, a bottle found its purpose as percussion. The room shrank until it felt like a box on a shelf in a much larger warehouse. Then we do it together, I said, and the word hung there, together, as if it had been waiting in the rafters with the dust for an invitation. He nodded once, not triumphant, not relieved, decided. We left by the back. The landing's dead camera watched us with all the intensity of a coin. In the hallway, The red of the exit sign kissed our skin the way emergency lights do when they've mistaken us for saints. On the stair, the air had that sting it gets before lightning picks a direction. Behind us, in the little room that smelled like plans, the lens I'd smelled and he'd seen continued to stare without eyes. I could feel Kai out there, not in the heat of pursuit, but in the opposite. A vast controlled cold, the scent of a man who had outsourced his pulse. He was watching. He was counting. He was thinking in zeros and ones. Let him, I said to the storm. We'll make a mess he can't clean with a delete key. The Port District at night is a church that forgot its hymns. Fog lay thick as old velvet, muffling the cranes into silhouettes and turning the container stacks into pews for ghosts with bad posture. Sodium lamps smeared halos across puddles rainbowed with oil. Somewhere out on the black water, a horn groaned like a baritone with regrets. We moved through it together. Me a ghost in a thrift store jacket, him a shadow with a purpose, and the city pretended not to watch. Every few steps, a rat took offense at our existence and held a narrow corridor for its in-laws. On the far side of the channel, a ferry announced itself and then changed its mind. Left, I said, because the fog made maps out of opinions. There's a place between the cannery and a storage yard that owes me a favor. Buildings owe you favors, Knox said. Some people do too, I said, and it surprised me how true it sounded out here, where truth steamed off your skin. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Our footfalls found a rhythm halfway between a retreat and an advance. We skirted a chain-link fence, stabbed with the kind of warning signs lawyers dream about, and ducked beneath a twisted section where the wire had lost an argument with a forklift years ago. The fog smelled like salt and rust and the old pennies of blood. I tasted adrenaline turning into something steadier as we pushed deeper into the district's forgotten grid. The warehouse I wanted was the kind the city doesn't bother condemning because everyone agrees it's deceased. Brick scabbed, with posters, windows squared with plywood, a corrugated roll-up door that curled at the bottom like a dead tongue. I knocked twice on the side entrance out of respect, then worked the lock by feel. It made a small sound of surrender, and we slipped inside. Dark, wide. The air kept memories of fish and hot machines and the laughter of men who were paid by the hour not to think about tomorrow. Our flashlights bit off neat cones from the black. Dust rose to greet us, like we had arrived to inherit something no one wanted. Charming, I said. I've seen worse, Knox said, angling his beam. He could have said it about rooms, or nights, or lives. In the back corner, a drum the size of a good mistake sat on a tripod. Someone had used it as a fire barrel before. The soot ring told the story. I found a box of shipping pallets dry enough to volunteer for a cause and started breaking slats. Knox watched, then took over with the kind of efficient violence that makes wood behave. I sparked a flame from a stubborn lighter, fed it kindling, and soon, a small orange argument flickered to life, cupping our faces in heat. We sat, he on an overturned crate, me on another, careful mirror images with a barrel of rust and warmth between. The fire braided the fog into ropes that unwound above us. Outside, the port cleared its throat. You always talk this much when you're scared? He asked, catching me mid-ramble about how fish smells are proof that miracles exist because how else would people still eat them? I poked the fire with a length of pallet. I always talk when idiots with guns are nearby. One corner of his mouth thought about smiling, then submitted it for later. You include me in that category. You're carrying 2, I said. 3, if discipline counts. He looked at the barrel for a moment, like it might produce an answer that wasn't mine. The light made a topography of his face I hadn't seen, lines I'd mistaken for severity that were really caution, a tiredness that didn't ask for pity because it knew where pity goes to become knives. You should sleep, he said. If I close my eyes, my brain will file a noise complaint. Let it. I'm behind on my fines. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the kind that gives you time to hear things you've been dodging. The fire ticked. Somewhere in the high rafters, a drip negotiated terms with gravity. The port's cranes lifted nothing in particular. I lost someone, he said finally, and the words settled on the rim of the barrel like birds that trust heat more than people. My Omega. There it was. Not a confession. A fact laid on the table with cutlery. The fire leaned toward him out of reflex. Order came down wrong, he said. Or right, if you're the kind of person who thinks math is immoral. Stand down. Hold perimeter. Do not engage. You followed it, I said, though the line of his jaw had already told me the story. I did, he said. By the time I could choose differently, the choice didn't care. What happened? An extraction that wasn't, he said. A room we had eyes on and no hands in. I listened to the recording in my sleep for months afterwards. Footsteps, a chair, the hinge of a door that needed oil. He drew a breath that sounded like he'd been saving it for emergencies. They teach you not to feel. Not because feeling makes you sloppy, but because it makes you stop. He looked at me through the fire, and I felt seen in a way that wasn't forensic for once. I stopped, he said. After. I kept moving, but I stopped. That's not living, that's paperwork with muscles. We let the barrel say the next few things. It did a passable job. And you? He asked, softer. You talk like a man who feels everything twice. I do, I said. And it was almost a relief to hand the admission to the night and see it refuse to flinch. I feel like the city installed extra wires. Every smell is a headline. Every sound is a witness. I tried to smile. It came out as a wince. They tell omegas to temper it. Wrap it up nice. Be useful. Be polite. Don't make the room work to include you. And you said no. I said yes to the wrong things for a while, I said. Yes to the badge. Yes to the right forms in the wrong hands. Yes to a partner who... I stopped, not because it hurt, but because naming it felt like inviting it to dinner. I thought loyalty was a synonym for silence. Then I said no. And they renamed me. Traitor, he said, not making it a question. Among other options, I said. It's amazing how creative people get when you remove yourself from their menu. He stoked the fire, careful. You still wear the badge in your head. I still wear the job, I said. Sometimes I wear the failure. Not a good look with these jeans. The warehouse creaked, as if a ship were turning in its sleep. The barrel's heat softened the feral ache in my ribs. It did nothing for the ache that sat lower. Old as the first time I realized a pack can smell like home and a trap at once. You could have taken me in, I said, because gratitude sometimes needs translation. On the station, in the attic, at the stash. I could have, he said. You didn't. I adjusted a variable, he said, and I could hear the ghost of a smile hiding in the math. And I wanted to see what you do when no one tells you who to be. Disappoint authority, I said, but make it look good. He huffed a laugh that sounded like something unfreezing. Noted. For a while, we let the quiet be a bridge. I could smell him over the wood smoke. Cedar, coffee, rain dried into fabric, that strange gentle thread I refused to name. My chest did an unreasonable thing and loosened. We're not enemies, he said. No, I said. We're an equation the city doesn't want solved. Outside, in the fog, something metallic clanged. We both turned, the same degree, the same speed. Two men who had been the hunter, and the hunted long enough that their muscles had built a private language. The sound didn't repeat. The fog took it into its mouth and swallowed. You trust me, he said. Not proud. Curious, like a scientist cataloging a species that shouldn't exist and yet does, brazenly. I trust the part of you that hates orders you can't make sense of, I said. And I trust that grief made a hole that obedience can't fill. Generous. Accurate, I said. Don't make me revise. The barrel burned down to a committed glow. Shadows drew closer, then leaned back. My eyes threatened mutiny. Knox leaned his shoulders against a column, and in the short but holy distance between us, something like rest pooled. We didn't touch it. We acknowledged it, like you acknowledge a cat that has decided to live with you. Get an hour, he said. I'll watch. You'll fall asleep standing, I said. I don't sleep on duty. You're off duty. I never am. I started to argue. I am very good at arguing with professionalism, but the fog shifted and brought with it a scent that cut me off at the knees. Cold. There are many ways alphas smell. Heat, spice, the clean edges of control. Kai had worn none of them the way other men do. He wore absence, like a suit. The scent I caught now, thin, clinical, scraped of heat, was a memory I'd filed in a cabinet I kept locked for a reason. I straightened. Knox registered the change a half-second after. His nostrils flared, not in hunger, not in anger, in calculation. "You smell it," I said. "I smell not smell," he said, and the phrase would have made me laugh if the floor hadn't just lowered a degree. The fog had teeth when it wanted. It chewed on the broken panes high up along the warehouse walls and spat them back as drafts. In those drafts rode a thread of metallic chill, like a refrigerated room door held momentarily open. Not close, not far. Observing. "Cameras," I said. "Portable. He likes the cheap ones he can throw away and still outspend you." Knox put a hand to his jacket front, where the mic line threaded under fabric. He didn't touch it. He just reminded himself, and me, that talk could be a vector. He extinguished the barrel with a calculated exhale and a shovel of ash, plunging us into a dark that had more texture now. "We move," he said. "Quiet. No lights. Back stare." "Copy," I said, because apparently we were borrowing each other's languages now. We ghosted the way we'd arrived, only thinner. The warehouse remembered us, without caring. On the catwalk above, a loose bolt ticked as it cooled, a metronome for men who needed new songs. We eased through the door into a corridor that once believed in OSHA. My hand found the wall and followed it, reading the bumps like braille for the doomed. At the end, a steel exit hatch. Knox checked the seam. I checked the hinge. He tilted his head in a way that meant listen, and I did, and the fog actually made sound as it pressed through cracks to find us. He opened. We slid into the alley. The port's breath hit us. Salt, tar, diesel, wet rope, the sigh of a civilization built on moving heavy things for the benefit of men whose hands had never lifted any. Knox set a direction, and I took the next one. Our steps stitched a pattern a smart predator could misread if he were arrogant. Cold again. Not on us. Near us. Watching the place where the fire had been. The corner of a rooftop coughed a gnat of infrared, and then swallowed it. "He's trailing," I said, low. "Doesn't want to spook us. He'll set the mouth of the trap a few blocks out. Then we choose the mouth," Knox said. We cut through a narrow passage crammed with abandoned crab pots and emerged into a lane that ran between two storage yards. The fog here took its job seriously. Visibility was a rumor, depth perception a dare. The chain link on either side buzzed with the occasional hum of electricity, the way fences purr when they dream. "We should go wide," I said. "He expects the straight line." "He expects both of us," Knox said. "We'll give him one and a ghost." "You prefer to be the ghost?" "I prefer," he said, and the softness left his voice like a soldier leaving a bed, to end the part where he chooses. Lights flickered at the far end of the lane. 2 brief winks that could have been a truck turning, could have been a signal that thought it was subtle. A gull screamed at the concept of dignity. My palm found the drive by reflex and stayed there. It pulsed against my skin like a second heart, smaller and meaner. "We split at the forklift yard," I said. "Loop to the cannery and converge by the loading cranes. No radios. Scent only." He nodded. Then, after a breath, he reached across the space between us and brushed. 2 fingers once along my sleeve, quick as a check of fabric. It wasn't a touch. It was a calibration. "Stay loud," he said. "Stay precise," I said. We peeled in opposite directions, and the fog took us as if it had been waiting with a tailored suit for each. Behind us, above us, around us, the port watched with all the attention of a god tired of prayers. Kai was close enough to count the beats between our steps, and far enough to enjoy it. Good. Let him prepare his ambush. Let him write the math on a whiteboard and call it inevitable. I bared my teeth to the fog and let the city smell me coming. The hangar sat on the city's last breath, where streetlights gave up and weeds rehearsed their comeback tour. Corrugated metal ribs arched over a concrete slab big enough to park a memory. Wind moved through broken panes and made the building sing a thin, injured note. The night smelled like dust, creosote, and the stubborn echo of gasoline. We'd split at the port and looped wide. I arrived first, the drive a warm coin against my ribs. My skin prickled the way it does when a room remembers your name. Back corner, I whispered into the dark. Don't be noble. I'm not, Knox said from the black just left of my heartbeat. I'm practical. He stepped into the slit of moonlight with the confidence of a man who could apologize to shadows and be forgiven. His shoulder brushed mine, not a touch, a calibration. And then we were inside, feet soft, lungs quieter. I'd used this hangar once for a dead drop that didn't die. I knew the angles, the blind corners, the places a camera would choose if it wanted to pretend to be clever. We crossed the floor to a smaller tool bay welded onto the far wall. A room inside a room with a workbench shaggy with metal shavings and a calendar still insisting it was 3 years ago. An hour, I said. Then we move. He nodded and scanned the rafters. His scent, cedar, coffee, rain hammered flat, settled the way a hush settles a courtroom. I felt my pulse try for an even tempo. A soft scrape of shoe leather from the hangar mouth explained how stupid comfort is. I spun. A figure detached from the dark, thin and anxious, and carrying a smell like vending machine coffee and insufficient sleep. Don't shoot, Eli said, both hands up, his palms bright flags in the gloom. I've been running. Every direction smells like a bad idea. You got good at that, I said, lowering the gun I wasn't sure when I'd drawn. Finding ideas. He studied Knox with his head cocked, professional curiosity outracing fear by half a step. So that's the legend. Eli, Knox said, neutral. The way he said names made them stand at attention. Look at us, Eli said, shaky smile installed. Just boys in a boys' club with terrible lighting. Why are you here? I asked. He swallowed. Because your ex-partner just asked me to set a table for two, and because I don't like who I am when I cook for men like him. Something too cold to be fear slid a coin between my shoulder blades. You talked to Kai. He talked at me, Eli said, and I listened like a coward until I remembered I owed you one. He flicked a glance at my jacket. That thing you're clutching like a teddy bear. How sure are you it isn't singing to him? The drive. Warm, yes, but it had been warm since we started running. I set it on the scarred workbench and pulled a hand wand from the duffel. Cheap RF detector, ugly as a sin no one enjoys. I passed it over the drive. The wand purred. Then it began to sing. A slow, smug heartbeat of signal pulsed out from the casing, too faint for amateurs, too clever for peace of mind. Sub-gigahertz, piggybacked on the city's industrial hum. The kind of beacon a man like Kai could smell from a mile away. The kind of betrayal you install when you laugh at the idea of wrists. My mouth went dry. It's tagged. Knox didn't move, but the air around him decided to stop pretending to be still. How long? Since the storage unit, I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to the man, who'd picked up the ledger and thought he could carry the weight without a receipt. Take it apart, Knox said. I flipped the casing with a knife point and found the rice grain transmitter, epoxied to a ground plane, smug in its invisibility. A lot of men trust the invisibility of small things. It's how men like Kai make a living. Can you kill it? Eli asked. Yes, I said. But not the ping it already sent. The first shot came as if to congratulate my honesty. It snapped through the high pane and sizzled past the bench, hot air kissing my cheek. The smell of cordite and burnt dust rolled after it like applause. Down, Knox said, already pulling me, already putting his body between mine and the math. 2 more shots stitched sparks off the concrete near the door. One tore a howl out of the metal sheeting. The hangar became a bell, and we were the stupid clappers. Behind the engine block, I said, and we dove behind an old forklift skeleton that had forgotten its name. Eli sprawled next to us, hands over his head like he could talk the bullets into losing interest. Outside, soft, measured footfalls spreading into positions. Inside, the scuttle of something small and brave. Above, night holding its breath the way witnesses do. 3 shooters, Knox said, eyes empty of panic. Ridge line at the door, one on the catwalk over the office, the third using the corner window as a funnel. Plus a conductor, I said. Kai likes to hear his music. He knows our positions, Eli breathed. I led him here, didn't I? I touched his wrist. He flinched like truth had bones. He led you, I said. You broke the string. Another round punched into the forklift mast. The ringing lit up my teeth. Knox peered around the chunk of metal, took 2 quick snapshots of the world, and ducked back with the ease of a man who could do this blind. Flash, I said, and pulled a road flare from the bag. The striker shrieked. The flare erupted into hungry orange, spraying the dark with an imitation of sunrise. I lobbed it into the open space, and the shooters adjusted for heat like good boys. Their next burst hit where a man would have chased light. Knox returned the favor with 3 precise answers that convinced the catwalk shooter to rethink his religion. The ridgeline answer came back, ugly and loud. Eli whimpered through his teeth and tried to be smaller. Kai, I shouted to the rafters, because sometimes you invite a god to his own altar. You enjoying your bedtime story? Silence. Then the cold air shifted, and his voice walked in like a doctor into a room that had paid for privacy. You should have been mine, he said. Calm, curious, dangerous like a winter road. I could have taught you what to keep and what to surrender. You could have been a person, I said, and it felt like putting a clean blade on a dirty table. Instead, you asked your mirror for advice. A pause, the good kind, if you like men like him to think. Then the third shooter tried the office window again, and Knox made that man reconsider windows as a concept. The smell of blood arrived, a copper ribbon unfurling across the hangar's stale breath. My stomach did an old familiar lurch and sat down. Move, Knox said. We sprint crawled to the tool bay door as bullets raked where we'd been. The hinge squealed like a snitch. We slid into the main hangar and found a different geometry. The flare threw drunk shadows up the high ribs. I could see the ridgeline muzzle wink. I could see the catwalk empty now, except for a rifle thinking about its owner's next life. Knox took the lead toward a stack of oil drums. I covered, counting in. My head. The way you count when you want courage to think it's math. The next burst sounded wrong. Closer, angrier. I shoved Knox down. A bullet kissed the air above his shoulder, and then, several inches lower where flesh is easier than angles, found him. He made a sound like a man who had stubbed his honor. Then his left hand clamped his right shoulder and came away dark. No, I said. I'm fine, he said, which is the official statement filed by men who are bleeding. The flare found something thirsty, oil soaked into ancient rags, and the hangar began to burn in a way that understood symbolism. Flames licked the forklift tires and took an interest in the workbench. Bad, Eli said, which was accurate and free. Kai's voice again, closer now, almost gentle. Stay put, Raiden. I'll collect you unbroken. I put my hand on Knox's uninjured arm and felt muscle trying to be stone. On your feet, I said. I don't leave equations half solved. We moved. The world got small and orange. Heat pressed us like an invitation we didn't sign. Smoke curled into the high space where the shells sound proof and gods live. The ridgeline shooter coughed out another magazine, and Knox, with his left arm, sent a lesson that shut the ridge up. We reached the ladder to the catwalk that ran along the wall. I half-dragged, half-pushed Knox up the rungs. He hissed through his teeth but made it, with the infuriating competence of men who refuse to be the problem in their own story. Eli crept behind, pale and very interested in a future. At the top, the catwalk felt like a promise waiting to be kept or broken. Through the smoke, a figure detached from the far end, tall, neat, the hole where heat should live. Kai didn't rush. He approached like a thesis, steps measured, gun low, eyes wrong. He smiled without rearranging his face. You look tired, Raiden. I told them you would. The city isn't kind to romantics. I'm not romantic, I said, putting myself between him and the man bleeding behind me. I'm stubborn. Same genre. His gaze slid to Knox, cataloged the blood, filed the result. Contractor. You overperformed. Knox stood straight as his shoulder allowed. Your directive changed, he said. You assumed compliance. I assumed enviable self-preservation, Kai said. But you two have contaminated each other with an old, unfashionable disease. Feeling, I said. Purpose, he said, and the word crawled out of his mouth like it had been raised in a lab. Smoke thickened, the fire below picked up an accent, and somewhere metal groaned the way ships do when they consider new shapes. Kai lifted the gun. I saw the minute flecks in his fingers that tell before the wrong math. I didn't think. I moved. The catwalk had a maintenance hatch with a rotten hinge and a bad attitude. I'd noticed it long ago. Kai had forgotten noticing was a job. I slammed my shoulder into it, and the hatch gave with a shriek. The section of railing he leaned against stuttered. He corrected with elegance born of arrogance. Knox, bleeding, left-handed, did something slower and better. He took aim at the steel cable that anchored the railing support. One clean shot. The ping sang up into the bones of the building. The railing lurched. The floor under Kai's feet dipped. He fired wild. The bullet whined into the ceiling and found nothing but history. I hit him low and hard. We slammed the rail. The support, already insulted by Knox's math, decided loyalty was a myth. It tore free. The world tilted. Kai dropped his gun. He grabbed for me. His fingers found my jacket and then the fabric. Screamed and let go the way dignity does when gravity asks nicely. He fell backwards into a bouquet of sparks and smoke, hitting the lower stack of drums with a sound I'll keep in a box forever. One rolled. One ruptured. Fire took the invitation personally. I lay on the catwalk, breath gone absent, ears roaring with fire and victory and grief. Knox loomed above me, white around the mouth, his right arm clamped tight, his left hand reaching. Below, Kai didn't move. The flames did. Eli's face appeared, a pale coin flipping through smoke. "We have to go," he said. And for once, every part of him told the same truth. We staggered down the opposite ladder into a heat that wanted to write its name on our lungs. The hangar door fought. We fought harder. It lost. Night hit us with cold and wet, and 1,000 unasked questions. Knox's knees dipped. I caught him by the waist the way you catch a brick wall that just remembered physics. His blood painted my fingers in a crude, urgent art. "Don't," I said, and it came out as both a plea and an order. I pressed my forehead to his temple, smoke in our hair, sirens learning how to say our names. "Don't you dare die. I still need someone to hate." His laugh was a cough that changed its mind. "Hate me later," he said, voice rough silk. "Carry me now." So I did. The sign over the frosted glass door read, "Northlight Investigations," in letters that looked a little too earnest for their age. Inside, the place smelled like paper, dust, and the faint citrus of floor polish that had given up halfway through the job. My desk sat by the window, piled high with open files and coffee rings that I pretended were part of the decor. Outside, the city yawned through a drizzle. Somewhere, a car alarm remembered its calling. I wasn't the same man who used to run through rooftops with a flash drive full of other people's sins. Now I ran background checks, missing pet reports, and, on brave days, divorce surveillance, a quieter kind of war. My reflection in the glass still carried the scar from Kai's last lesson, but my eyes had learned how to blink again. The door clicked open with its usual complaint. "You're late," I said, without looking up. "By how much?" I looked. Knox stood there in a light blue shirt rolled at the sleeves, dark slacks, hair slightly damp from the rain. He smelled like coffee, leather, and the memory of adrenaline. The shoulder that used to bleed now carried a paper bag. 3 minutes, I said. Not the best record for a legend. He smiled, slow and deliberate. "Give me 1 more second," he said, setting the bag on my desk, "and I'll catch up." Still dramatic. Still alive. He pulled a chair closer and sat, too casual for a man who once shot through a burning hangar. The bag offered up the holy trinity of peace offerings, 2 coffees and a folded stack of takeout napkins. "Thought I'd file the report in person," he said. "Reports are for clients," I said. "We don't have any right now." "Then, it's a social visit." I raised an eyebrow. "You have those now?" "I'm practicing." We drank in silence for a few seconds. The coffee was better than it had any right to be. The window glowed gray. I could hear the faint hum of the old ceiling fan pretending to do work. "You're healing," I said, nodding toward his shoulder. "You're observant," he replied, flexing at once. "No new holes, a personal best. You ever think about quitting? Work or breathing?" "Both." He took another sip. "I'm not built for retirement." "Neither am I," I said. "But I'm trying the uniform on." He leaned back, eyes tracing the mess on my desk. "You always wanted to be your own boss. Turns out my boss is just as irritating." His laugh was short but real, the kind that still surprised him when it happened. The quiet that followed wasn't the awkward kind. It was the kind you earn after surviving the same war. Outside, the drizzle turned to real rain, each drop tapping the glass like a soft metronome. "So," I said, breaking it, "are you here for the coffee or the company?" "Yes," he said. I snorted. "You know that answer doesn't narrow things down." "It wasn't meant to." He watched me with that same look he'd had the night of the hangar, steady, curious, a little defiant. Only now, the edge had softened. I caught myself matching his breathing without meaning to. "You could have stayed with the agency," I said, "taken another assignment." "I had one," he said, eyes on the window. "They told me to find you again. Make sure you were gone." "Funny," I said. "You're terrible at that job." "I quit mid-shift. And here I thought you didn't break orders." "Maybe I learned from someone who does," he said. The warmth that slid through me wasn't from the coffee. We sat there a while longer, talking about nothing that mattered, the new case I might take, the cafe that opened next door, how the city still smelled like burnt sugar after rain. He stayed. I didn't ask him to leave. Eventually, he rose, buttoning his sleeve like he was about to head into another kind of storm. "I'll send clients your way," he said. "Only the paying kind. They're the most boring." "Good," I said. "I've had enough excitement for a few lifetimes." He paused at the door, hand on the frame. "Raiden." "Yeah?" He smiled, quiet, dangerous, sincere. "Next time I'm late, start the coffee." The bell above the door chimed when he left. His scent lingered, subtle and steady, like proof that survival could smell warm. I turned back to the window. The city was still gray, still endless, still pretending it didn't know my name. I traced my finger across the glass and watched the condensation blur the skyline into something soft. The scent of the hunt never really leaves you, I thought. You just learn to change the target. And somewhere below, a familiar footstep faded into the rain, steady as a heartbeat choosing to keep going.